Well, now to the latest out of South Australia, where plans to build a nuclear waste facility near Kimba have of course been scrapped by the Albanese government after the federal court ruled in favour of a local Indigenous group that was against it. Now, the abandonment of the plan apparently may even jeopardise the AUKUS nuclear submarine plans. Here was Resources Minister Madeleine King yesterday trying to justify the decision.
The previous government sought to temporarily store intermediate-level radioactive waste on agricultural land and contemplated the double handling of the transport of this waste. This approach raised concerns regarding international best practice and safety standards. The Labor Party, National Party and Liberal Party have recognised through successive terms of government that responsibly managing this waste is imperative for the nation.
Well, joining me to discuss the fallout is the man who owns the property where the nuclear waste dump would have been built, Andrew Baldock. Andrew, welcome to the show. Firstly, did you have any inkling, or did the federal government come to you and say, we are going to get rid of this?
No, we hadn't heard anything. The first we heard of it was on the news yesterday morning, to be honest. And frankly, since the minister's been in charge of this portfolio, we've seen or heard very little of her. It's been quite disappointing.
But how does this move to scrap the facility impact not only you? I mean, obviously you were intimately involved in it, potentially, but also the community. This is a project that had, 61% support in a community ballot. The community around Kimba wanted it, and it gets trumped by a local Aboriginal land corporation that goes to court on 5 different points and says, oh, there's sacred sites on the land and all this sort of thing. All that stuff was chucked out by the court. The one thing that they picked them up on was that the decision to put the dump there, when it was made by then Resources Minister Keith Pitt, had quote-unquote apprehended bias, which basically means he decided that was where it was going to go and that's where he wanted it to be. So supposedly he hasn't considered it hard enough or some kind of nonsense like that. But for something that was promised to the community, that would have come with jobs, obviously would have come with a payday for you, it must be a blow.
Oh, it's a joke, Caleb. The irony of it that we've been pulled up on a minister having a bias who came in a process that ran for 7 years, where they went through and strongly supported the process. We've been to court numerous times. Really, when that was legislated, it was quite a relief to think that the politics had been taken out of this process. And then to turn around to have a minister strike this off on what I would say is their bias, it's just ridiculous. And for our community, it's devastating. We'd been at this for 7 years. A lot of businesses were hanging on because of what was happening locally and what was going to be happening in the future. Other businesses were looking at how they'd get themselves ready to deal with construction. You know, we looked at opportunities for the school. We're a town of 700 people. You don't have to change the dial very far to make a difference whether this is a sustainable community or not. It's a massive blow, Caleb.
The argument, of course, from the local Aboriginal Land Corporation, as I said before, was all this stuff about, sacred sites, and they were concerned that the stories they hold on the land would die if there happened to be a nuclear waste dump there. But my reading of it, as a former South Australian, I was covering this stuff and writing about it when I lived there, and I've kept a pretty close eye on it since. My reading of it, that it was much more about politics than it was about any sacred sites on that piece of land that you own. And you even had people who were part of this land corporation posing up in the local paper, The Advertiser, with T-shirts on that said, no nuclear waste dump in SA. Now, that to me seems to be a pretty clear message. It's not about sacred sites, it's about a holus bolus opposition to the idea of there being a nuclear waste dump. What was the feeling on the ground? Was this driven genuinely by concern for the land, or was it driven by politics?
There's no concern for the land, Caleb. I mean, it took 3 years to come up with the fairy tales that we're hearing, to be honest. There are important places in our community, but I'll be pretty clear that that's not one of them. And the issue here, yes, I guess it's tied to the voice. It's undoubtable. I mean, the Labor government were backed into a corner of how they deal to go back against an Indigenous corporation. And this is a real problem, not only for our community, but also for the nation when we look at what it means for nuclear medicine.
It's a crying shame. Nuclear waste is buried under hospitals, it's buried at Lucas Heights, all over the country, and no one bats an eyelid. But we try to build a nuclear waste dump in South Australia and create some industry, and all hell breaks loose. Andrew Baldock, thank you for your time tonight.